There are men who do not speak, men who do not raise their voice, men who sit in rooms and offer no opinion, no reaction, no resistance. I used to know one of these men. He would sit there, smile, but not comment, agree, yet not have his own opinion. Those around him used to say he was a man of few words, but I knew differently. He wanted to speak, he just didn't have the courage to say anything. They said he was just quiet. Some might call this stoicism, others strength, composure, groundedness. But stillness is not measured by volume, and silence does not always mean coherence. Some silences are sacred, others are strategy, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear the difference. Because real stillness isn't empty. It doesn't avoid, it doesn't contract, it doesn't shrink itself behind stoicism or spiritual language. Stillness is not an absence, it's a field. It holds, it sees, and it meets distortion without being pulled into it. But many men confuse this with suppression. They grow quiet not because they've reached coherence, but because they've been taught that silence makes them appear strong. They've learned that fewer words means more presence, that being unbothered makes them appear powerful, that detachment is enlightenment. But a man who is silent because he's scared to speak is not still, he's suppressed. A man who doesn't speak his truth because he fears rupture, rejection, or reaction is not coherent, he's contained. Stillness is not silence born of fear. Stillness is silence born of integration. There is a big difference. And you'll feel the difference in the room. A man who is silent from coherence transmits a signal. You can feel his presence. It's not demanding, it's not loud, but it is undeniable. A man who is silent from suppression feels absent. He disappears whilst sitting beside you. He creates space that feels empty but not held. Stillness is an energetic leadership. It anchors the room. It doesn't remove itself from it. But because many men were taught that emotions are dangerous, that needs are weaknesses, that assertion equals conflict, they shrink into what looks like discipline, but it's really fear dressed in an elegant disguise. They spiritualize avoidance. They call it letting go. They call it detachment. They call it choosing peace. But peace that comes from avoiding truth is not peace at all. It's paralysis. And eventually, the field knows. A coherent man may not speak very often, but when he does, the room shifts. Because he doesn't speak to perform, he speaks to land. He speaks without edge, without distortion, without the need to be understood. And when he does not speak, he is still present. His silence is not absence, it's structure, it's architecture. But the man who confuses silence with safety is not building anything. He's waiting for the moment to pass so he doesn't have to reveal his inner conflict. This is the danger of forming stillness. It becomes another mask, another form of distortion, another subtle fracture in the field, and eventually someone feels it. Not because he lashes out, but because his absence becomes a vacuum that others try to fill. This is how chaos begins, in the presence of a man who pretends his silence is strength, but he's secretly hoping someone else will hold what he refuses to express. Now, you're not required to speak every time. You're not called to dominate the room. Stillness is the opposite of voice. It's the source of it. But stillness without presence is collapse. Stillness without coherence is bypass. Stillness without the capacity to speak when truth must be spoken is not stillness, it's surrender to fear. And so many men appear calm, but inside they're tense, rigid, guarded. They think they're embodying sovereignty when really they're just managing their own reactivity. But a man who has done the work no longer needs to manage. He simply is. True stillness comes after confrontation, after grief, after rage that has been fully met, after fire has burned through the noise. Stillness is not the avoidance of conflict. It's what remains once you've stopped performing for love. Once you've stopped hiding your needs in noble language. Once you've stopped confusing absence with leadership. That's when silence becomes sovereign. When it no longer masks fear. When it holds without needing to control. When it becomes a transmission instead of a tactic. So if you're quiet, ask yourself, is this coherence? Or am I simply afraid to rupture the illusion? If you're detached, ask yourself, is this clarity? Or am I just afraid to feel? If you're choosing peace, ask yourself, is this sovereignty? Or have I simply convinced myself that stillness is safer than truth? Because stillness that hides from truth is not stillness at all, it's a slow disappearance. And the world does not need more men disappearing. The world needs men whose silence is earned, men who do not speak often because they no longer need to assert ego, not because they're afraid of being misunderstood. Men who speak only when the field calls, and when they do, the signal is so clean, so exact, that distortion has no foothold left. Men whose stillness doesn't mute the room, but deepens it. Men who have done the fire, held the grief, met the war inside, and emerged not loud, not righteous, but sovereign. Stillness is not a pose, it's not a performance, it's not an aesthetic, it's not a lack of movement. It is the pure architecture of presence. And when a man carries that kind of presence, the world no longer needs to hear his story. It feels his signal instead. And everything that cannot match that frequency falls away. Not in violence, not in noise, but in silence. The kind of silence that is not empty, but eternal. This is The Architect Speaks.